Dishonorable Mention is brought to you by 813area.com. 813area.com is the place to go to see where to go and what to do in all of Hillsborough County. Whether it's the best events, the newest restaurants, or where to be in Tampa Bay, 813 Area is your resource for everything happening around town. For the latest on where to be in 813, check out 813area.com. Dishonorable Mention is now on social media. Follow us on Facebook, and we're at Dishonorable Pod on Twitter too. Next week, we'll start taking questions from Twitter because y'all have been an amazing part of this. Thank you.
Do you remember when they had the raisin biscuits in the early 80s?
I was born in 81.
Might have been mid-80s because my brother remembers them. But they would do these cinnamon biscuits, and they had these little, you know what I'm talking about, Ernest?
I do know the cinnamon biscuits.
And then that was the last time I feel like Hardee's was ever really relevant.
Did I tell you what happened? Yet another story my wife doesn't like. I think I told you guys this story. So when my third child was born, it was a planned scheduled C-section. October 19th, 2001.
My father-in-law's birthday. Carry on.
And so the night before, my wife had to fast. She couldn't eat anything after 6 p.m., I think. So I said, well, if you can't eat, I'm not going to eat. We're in this together. You and I in this together. And so I fasted with her, and we got up that morning, and we had to be at the hospital at I think 6:30, and get there on time. And she goes in at 7, and the doctors say, well, Mr. Hooper, we're going to need to prep her. And, you don't need to be in the room. Why don't you wait outside while we do some preliminary work? And my wife said, hey, why don't you go down to the cafeteria and get something to eat? And I said, no, we are in this together, you and I.
Every time you say you and I want to be like, you and I were made to
You can't eat, I can't eat. And as soon as I stepped out of the room, I ran down to my car. I jumped in. I drove to Hardee's because I was starving. And I got a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit and 2 cinnamon raisin biscuits and scarfed it all down and got back to the room right before 8. And she said, did you go eat? And I said, no, we're in this together.
I was waiting for her to sniff you and be like, I smell bacon on your fingers.
So every October 19th, I tell the story of when my daughter was born to my daughter, and I share that anecdote, and my wife says, it's really not funny.
My friends just got engaged at a Hardee's, which I know sounds...
Why?
Because... In an ironic way, or
It was supposed to be unexpected. They were friends for about 15 years before they ever looked across the room and were like, oh my gosh, you're my person, right? But the first time they met, they had a meeting at this Hardee's, and it's up in Pensacola, but way out in one of these kind of more rural areas. So he took her back to the first place where they ever met when he proposed to her. So it was a thoughtful concept. They didn't even eat anything when they went back. I was like, well, what did you guys eat?
Let me ask, was this Gonzalez? Was this Pace?
It was Milton, I believe.
Oh, my God. Romance at the Milton Hardee's.
And they're getting married on 4/20, I believe, or something like that.
I think there was a Harlequin romance called Love at the Milton Hardee's.
Stop.
Hey, well, welcome to another episode of Dishonorable Mention. I'm Ernest Hooper of the Tampa Bay Times. And as always, I am joined by Dr. Carla Mastracchio, State Representative Chris Latvala, and community activist Becca Teeter. And I thought we would start this episode by talking about the Mueller report. Now, we still don't know the full details of what's in the Mueller report. So to me, the question is, how should the Democrats react to the Mueller report? Should they continue to demand to see it? Should they continue to try to make something of it? Or do they dig themselves a deeper hole by trying to create an issue from the Mueller report when it appears that there's not enough there to in any way make the president look bad?
I don't know. It's hard for me to get on board with this whole Mueller report bandwagon because I never thought it was going to be anything in the first place. And I think you had a strategic moment where you could have used it to your advantage, but now anything less than an indictment against the president is going to be a failure. So they've kind of screwed themselves, and I don't know. I just don't think they've handled it very well. And I think to continue to talk about it just makes them look bitter and like they're sore losers.
Yeah, I definitely think it's time for them to let it go and to borrow a line from Frozen.
I was going to say, can we sub that in?
We could.
Okay.
And I think there may be some things in the report that are embarrassing to the president. I mean, they spent 2 years delving into his campaign. So we may learn some things about the inner workings of the campaign that are embarrassing to President Trump. But embarrassment doesn't seem to faze the man or his supporters. And furthermore, he seems to be ready to move from it. He thinks this is an opportunity for him to advance some other things in his agenda. I think he's mistaken about that. I think he's mistaken to go towards immigration and healthcare reform so suddenly. And I think stop talking about the Mueller report. Let's talk about immigration. Let's talk about healthcare reform, because especially healthcare reform, I think is a losing issue for President Trump and the Republican Party.
Just as a quick reminder, and I don't know what I care about or what I don't. I mean, I guess I feel like the public should have access to that information.
Sure.
But can you imagine if one of my favorite tweets that I read on the whole thing is by a legal professor, Orrin Kerr, and he wrote, "Imagine if the Starr report had been provided only to President Clinton's Attorney General, Janet Reno, who then read it privately and published a 4-page letter based on her private reading, stating her conclusion that that President Clinton committed no crimes." I mean, it's not like that environment. People would have been like, you know what, Janet, that seems fair. We should move on.
Well, I think aren't some of the
But I
grand
don't-
jury, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, other than perjury, when President Clinton lied about sex, I don't think he committed a crime.
Agreed.
And he had sex in the Oval Office with a 21-year-old intern that was in college. But I don't.
I'm really pleased you didn't say that aspirationally. Go on.
Let's hope not. But isn't grand jury testimony, isn't that kept redacted or secret? Or
Yes, the grand jury
so I feel
testimony
like
will be redacted.
Yeah, and I feel like that's okay because that's the law. So
And I think, like many times is the case, Democrats have gone overboard and will go overboard when it comes to the Mueller report. For months, they were holding Mueller in high regard, and I believe that he's a career public servant who did a good job and in his service to our country, and in particular with the Mueller report. And so, if he determined that the president didn't break any laws and determined that the president's son and daughter and everyone, closely around him did not break any laws and that there was no collusion, we should take that for what it's worth.
You mentioned the Starr report. I feel like at the end of the day, the Starr report was a losing proposition for the Republican Party.
Oh, absolutely.
Learn from your history. The tack now needs to be the Mueller report needed to happen. There needed to be an investigation because we were led to believe a foreign power tried to undermine our elections. And I would just keep repeating that. That's true. We needed to determine exactly what happened. We probably need to continue to investigate that aspect of it. But I would not continue to use this to try to drag down President Trump.
Well, as we always say, reflection and taking a look at history is valuable. So I don't know. I don't have a strong answer on it. I'm not savvy enough on what is the right answer. But again, I do think at least some people's lives could have been treated with a lot more integrity if the Star report had been handled differently. So,
Like Monica Lewinsky. I
Right.
mean, her life was pretty much ruined.
Yeah.
And she was a 21-year-old college kid.
I think she turned out okay, though. I follow her on Twitter, and I think she's great.
I follow
Well,
her too. I
that
love her
was
so
like,
much.
She's
you know,
great.
20 years later, she was able to get her life back. But for years, she was kind of the scapegoat and the laughing stock
Yeah,
Oh,
of
she's
that
so
whole
what?
deal. And in many regards, she was a victim.
she was totally a victim, but she's killing it now. And girl, Monica, we love you. If you're listening, call us. We'd love to have you on the show.
You know, but Chris is right. I mean, I've heard her talk not so long ago about how, you know, she still has to say every time to her nieces and nephews, because if they Google her, because they know she has history, it's the same thing. It's the first thing that comes up, regardless of all the accomplishments she's had since.
And Hillary Clinton spent years demonizing her.
Yeah, I know. That was really sad. That really upsets
Dare I
me.
say, I think that was a factor in the 2016 election.
It's totally a factor. She was an
absolutely.
asshole to her.
Yeah, and all those women that for years said that they had affairs with Bill or that he had done things to them while he was governor or running for governor or even attorney general in Arkansas. And it was Hillary's, one of her jobs was to demonize all of them. And, you know, whether it was Paula Jones or Juanita Broderick, you know, et cetera.
Well, you know, one of my theories, and we'll never be able to prove it, but one of my theories is that if Hillary Clinton had divorced Bill Clinton after his tenure came to an end in 2000 and everything else remained equal. She went on to become a U.S. Senator. She went on to be Secretary of State. I think she wins in 2016. Now, I can't prove that, of course, but it's a theory that I like to put out there because I find it to be provocative.
I think you
I
very
like being provocative.
and I think you very well may have been right about that because he was the anchor around that campaign.
Well, at one point he was seen as a boost, but you know, the results of the 2016 election tell us that he may not have been a positive for Secretary of State Clinton.
Why do you think it's so important to us, and I mean like us as Americans, to feel a personal connection? Not just look at somebody on their resume, but feel a personal connection to a candidate. Like, I hear it all the time. I assume it's true across all party lines. They'll be like, well, I really like what Ernest stands for, but he doesn't excite me. I don't like his personality, or he's not very warm. Whereas I may not agree with Carla on as much, but I really feel like Carla's my friend and she'd advocate for me.
Well,
like,
it's the beer test. You know, who would you rather have a beer with?
But doesn't 2016 change that?
No.
Isn't
No, I think
2016 about
2016
you don't
I
think
think
2016
amplifies
proves
that.
that for
you
sure.
don't think 2016 is about pragmatism?
Would you
over
like to have a
principle?
beer with
Some
Hillary
people,
Clinton?
but not everybody. I think the majority of people know.
no.
I think a lot of Republicans supported Donald Trump because they didn't like Hillary Clinton.
Or I
And
think that
they took a pragmatic approach. They thought he could win. They didn't believe in
I don't know about
him from a
that.
moral perspective. They didn't, you know, certainly they thought he would cut taxes and they favored that. But I don't think they believed in him in any other way. I don't think they believed in
He
him in
was
terms
the
of foreign policy.
anti-politician.
See, and I think that's kind of what got him elected, because I mean, there's certain people who were going to vote for the Democrat regardless of whether they felt a connection to or Secretary Clinton or not. But then on the same note, I think some people were like, you know what? I wouldn't mind hitching my wagon to this wild show. Like, it's like the wild nut job at a fraternity party.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So I
Sure.
think there's a percentage of people that were like, you know what? Let's set this house on fire and see what we can do.
Let's see what happens, because I feel like the alternative is probably not something I want to support. So I'll give this guy a chance.
Yeah, he's like a bad spring break fling. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That has gone terribly wrong.
I also think, though, there was a percentage that said, I can't stand this guy, but I dislike Hillary more. And maybe something of, you know, maybe he will really mess up and Mike Pence will end up being president and I'll be happy.
I know a lot of people that are pretty high up in the federal government that voted for Donald Trump begrudgingly, but they're like, you know, I really don't think that Secretary Clinton's going to do a good job. So I think he might surround himself with the right people. And I think he might, you know, be able to fix some things or be able to help move us forward in some areas that we want. And I understand that. I get that. I mean, at the same time, I know some people who are pretty high up in the federal government that didn't and really enjoyed Secretary Clinton and wanted her to succeed. So I feel like I don't know. I think it's a hard thing because I think the reasons why people voted for Donald Trump are so varied that you can't just say it was this one thing. You know, like you can't say gun violence is this one thing. You know, it's this amalgamation of all of these things that are complicated and nuanced. And I think it's good that we're talking about them, but I don't think we can kind of narrow it down to just one thing.
Are we going to look back and give President Trump credit for good things?
I think we should, and here's why. I think that it's like a puppy. When the puppy does something really good, you're like, good job, keep doing that, we're going to do it again. And then when the puppy does something bad, you discipline that puppy. You can't say everything is bad or else nothing is bad, right? So I feel I'm torn about that because I think they do some things that are good, but every time they do one thing that's good, they do 3 things that are distracting and or bad. So I think we should kind of redirect and reward the good behavior and try to change behavior through rewards.
And I think that Donald Trump has changed politics, and it may, last a generation. I think now you'll see more celebrities, more business people running for higher office.
I don't think Donald Trump changed that, though.
But there are things that he did that a normal politician would never be able to get away with.
But I think that he can get away with it.
Yeah, making fun of John McCain, the thing with the Khan family when he was bashing them, the things that he said about Megyn Kelly, a traditional politician, that would be disqualifying right off the bat.
As it should be.
And that made him stronger because he never backed down.
Him stronger. I think he's a very unique figure. I don't think regular politicians and other people can get away with the same shit that he's gotten away with. I don't, because I think he has a very unique personality. His approach has been very unique. And I think if somebody tries to replicate that, they're going to fail.
I mean, I think that if somebody like Dwayne Johnson, who has said before that he was thinking he's The Rock.
Oh, okay.
Who said before that he may run for president. Somebody like that, I think if The Rock ran for president, he would be an instant contender. Whether it's somebody from Hollywood, somebody from the business world. The Starbucks guy, was disqualifying in the Democratic Party because he was too normal. Yeah. And so the other Democrats,
That's true. He was too normal. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
I think
Wait a minute.
No,
he was too successful.
Right.
I think he was too normal.
Too
and
successful.
Too status quo.
We love Bloomberg, and he's a freaking.
Do you love Bloomberg? Do you?
Yeah,
Yes,
Bloomberg
I feel like
couldn't
a lot
run
of
either.
Don't.
Bloomberg would be my number one.
I
choice
love
to
Bloomberg,
run.
but I don't think he's electable. I don't. I don't think they want someone who can win. I don't think they want someone who's actually a legitimate contender who can go toe to toe with the president and who can win.
They would rather like somebody like Beto, whose only success or his claim to fame is because he lost. I don't know what that guy stands for.
Is dancing on tables and going to the dentist looking really like hot and goofy. He's like the adorable hot guy.
And those stories that he wrote when he was younger and all that kind of stuff.
You guys are unfairly slaying the Democratic Party.
I am not unfairly slaying the Democratic Party. I'm a part of the Democratic Party, but I'm going to be critical when there needs to be.
I think you're taking a certain part of the Democratic Party and painting with too broad.
I am sick of the tech bros. I am so sick of them.
I mean, yes, there are people who are to the left who are looking for something new and fresh, but the front runner, as the polls have indicated, is Joe Biden, who is very much in the middle, who's very much in the moderate, who is very much a quote unquote normal guy. Let's not lose sight of that fact. I think Howard Schultz took himself out of the Democratic Party. I think he launched an independent campaign not because he couldn't win as a Democrat, but because he believes he could have more success as an independent, and because he has disappointment with both parties. We'll see how it plays out. But I certainly think, to your point, Carla, I certainly think there needs to be more pragmatism in the Democratic Party, and it needs to be more about who can win and less about who makes me feel good, Becca.
I think it's about not necessarily who can win versus who makes me feel good. I think it's who can win and they make me feel good. I feel like that combination doesn't have to be either or, because I feel like I want to say 2008 election, all the Republicans were like, I can beat Barack Obama. It's like, we don't like you. So I feel like you don't have to have an either or when it comes to that.
As a Republican, if I were, to vote in the Democratic primary of who I would want, of that bunch to be president, I would vote for Joe Biden. I think that Joe Biden will be a victim of the Me Too crowd, as was evident this past week.
We're gonna now.
And I think that I think he's going to get Me Too'd, because of the pictures
You don't
with
now
him.
Me Too'd. What you do is you commit either lecherous or illegal acts against people of a sexual nature, and oh my gosh, people actually are holding you accountable now.
There are pictures of him that are somewhat creepy, and I think those are going to come back.
But that's not a victim of Me Too. That's a victim of a culture that says no more. That's his actions. It's his fault, not anybody else who's in the photos. And I know you're not attacking women when you say that, but the way you're saying it, the language behind it, it sounds like it's like,
okay,
here comes another angry
There
lady.
is a story that broke this week
from years ago
about President Biden.
President Biden,
that's
are you
pretty good.
foreshadowing?
Did sound
Man.
good. About Vice President Biden kissing a woman
on the back of her head.
On the back of her head.
I thought it was the neck, but it's okay.
No,
actually, the neck is
the
worse than
report
the back
I
of the head.
saw said the back of the head. Said he grabbed her by both her shoulders, standing behind her, and kissed her on the back of the head. The woman who lodged the complaint says she doesn't believe he did anything legally wrong, but she felt violated. She felt like, her space, if you will, was violated. And she said that while it may seem innocent to those who aren't on the receiving end, if you're on the receiving end, you have a very different perspective. And whether this rises to the level of derailing his campaign remains to be seen. This is what I'm talking about when I talk about pragmatism. Things were revealed about Donald Trump, yet his supporters stuck with him because they thought he could beat Hillary and they wanted to see him be president. Will the Democrats take a similar approach? Will they dismiss something like this because they think Joe Biden is the one guy or the best guy to take on President Trump?
Well, I think there's a difference between bragging about grabbing someone by the vagina and kissing them on the back of the head. I think those are two very different things. Mm-hmm. And I think we need to look at that in context. And I question this person's motives for bringing this up 2 years later, not because I think that somebody is, lying or anything like that. But I also feel like a lot of people grab you by the shoulders and kiss me on the back of the head. A lot of people at conferences, when they're saying hello, when they're, talking to me, that happens a lot. So I feel like
I almost was like at the swingers convention.
at the furry convention that I went. I'm just kidding. I actually walked in the middle of a furry convention once and it was hysterical. But
that is fascinating.
That's a
Where
story
were you?
I was in the Marriott at Atlanta, and I was in the Tiki bar there. It's like the home of the Mai Tai. And I was sitting there.
My tie.
And,
you up later.
And I saw this bunny walking by. And I was like, that was weird. And I was chit-chatting, whatever. And then I saw another furry creature walk by. And I was like, okay, that's really weird. So then I walked into the other room and there was a furry convention. And it was like a bunch of furry costume people getting on. It was really weird.
So
I went back to the Tiki bar.
Back to
So anyway,
the
so
topic
I digress.
at hand.
So back to what I'm saying before. I don't think that it's this necessarily. You're lying if you bring something up 2 years later, 3 years later. I'm not saying that. It could very well be true, but I think that if you're annoyed that someone violated your personal space without thinking of, okay, what is my statement going to do to the second and third order effects? And do I want to disqualify somebody for president? I think that you should go ahead and make that statement if that is something you want to do. Does that make,
And I think Joe Biden will be treated differently because the liberal and socialist wing of the Democratic Party do not like him.
Right.
And there are other people that could be the nominee.
I'm with you on this one.
And I look at Virginia as an example. You had the governor there that almost resigned until it was shown
That
that
guy's a shit
the lieutenant governor was then accused by, I believe, 2 women of sexual assault. And it wasn't just sexual harassment, it was actual assault. And I believe it was 2 women. I may be mistaken, and it may have only been 1. So then the governor didn't resign, the lieutenant governor didn't resign, and then the third guy in line was the attorney general, who also wore blackface. And so if those 3 people resigned, then a Republican would have become governor, and that was treated completely differently because that was more pure politics.
Virginia's a
and
weird state,
there are
though.
things
Virginia's just a shit show.
hold
now,
on.
So I don't
hold
think
on.
that's
Hold on.
we live in strange times.
Hold on. The governor of Virginia wore a blackface
or a KKK hood.
some
I'm
30
not really sure.
some 30 years ago when
So?
he was a young man. No, that matters. That matters.
I don't think it does. I think in this particular instance, it really doesn't.
In comparison to what Mike Hertel, who was appointed Secretary of State by Ron DeSantis, oh yes, and comparing those two, it makes a huge difference. You have to look at how he conducted his life in the 30 years that followed that decision to wear a blackface. The governor of Virginia has a record of being a fair and honorable person.
But I think Mike Hertel has
in the
too.
decades that followed. But Mike Hertel was 1, an elected official, 2, much older when he chose to wear blackface, and 3, even if he wasn't wearing blackface, he made fun of Katrina victims 6 months after they had died. It's not a good analogy. It's a very different case with the governor of Virginia, where he could point to other things he's done with his life. Mike Hertel could not.
I don't even think it's about
Mike
that.
Hertel was respected by both parties as the supervisor of election.
Until they found out he made fun of Katrina victims in the wake of their deaths.
But I think it also, you have to look at how they handle it afterward. The Virginia governor did not handle it well. I mean, his apology was a non-apology. He was like, I'm not really sure if I'm in the KKK hood or if I'm in blackface. I'm not really sure if that was me at all.
And
So-
Ernest, the fact that he was in there's blackface next to a guy in a KKK hood, is that any different than? Because I would think
like
that
what
would be
medical school
treated
did you
somewhat
go to?
differently than just showing up somewhere in blackface.
I think it's different because of his youth and because of how many years ago it occurred and how he chose to lead his life after that.
I think it's how he chose to respond. I agree with you that I think if something's a long time ago, that's cool. I think that, not necessarily cool, but I think that, we should look at context. I think context is really important. But if you choose to see that photo and then respond the way he did, you need to go, buddy. I'm sorry. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. See ya.
I just hope nobody finds the pictures of me dressed up as Britney Spears in high school. Because
we're looking for those photos.
I'm totally
not
looking
be
for
pretty.
those. I'm wearing the headset. You want it?
Mr. Ugly
No.
2000, I was dressed as Britney Spears, sports bra and all.
Well, the photo of me in the Mr. Cheerleader contest is out there.
Oh, I was a cheerleader too.
I think it's on my Facebook page, actually. So
And
I have no shame about that.
I also think this matters if
should
someone's
you?
an elected official or not. If someone's a CEO or an attorney or a community activist or whatever, I think it's different if you look at something that happened in their past in context because they're not representing a large majority of people as their
Isn't that a
representative.
contradiction of
No.
what you just said? Because the guy who's the supervisor of elections guy did do that stuff when he was a public official, and the
Right.
governor of Virginia did it when he was in college.
I think those things are both wrong, by the way. I think both of them should go, just so we're clear.
I don't know.
I disagree.
I think both are like, bye-bye, see ya.
And I know Mike Hertel, and I know his wife, and so there's parts of that story that have never
Right,
made
sure.
it to the full public. But would it be any
you can bring
different?
them. You can bring them to the public today, Chris.
Yeah.
If would it be any different if that party was a very small group of people so it wasn't the Halloween party that he went to was a very intimate setting with family?
No, I don't think that matters.
No, it just means
No.
his family sucks. Or
Yeah,
her
it just
family
means
sucks. I
No,
don't
no,
even-
it was not. It was not his
He
current one.
made fun of Katrina victims. The blackface is almost irrelevant to me. He made fun of people who died in a natural
Yeah, that's
disaster.
really bad. That's really bad.
That could have been prevented. Yeah, it's
Had they
horrifying.
only, if the mayor and governor had only listened to President
Oh
Bush.
boy, are we going to
and got out
retry
of town.
Katrina now? I don't think we have a podcast long enough to do
I
that.
think there are podcasts on Katrina actually. So
Oh, I think Ray Nagin did a horrible job on the whole Katrina deal. I mean, they should have gotten those people out of town, and those buses just sat empty.
All right, let's shift to another Tampa Bay topic. This week, the State University System Board of Trustees approved the appointment of Stephen Carell as the new University of South Florida president.
I really hope he does an episode of The Office on campus.
I do too. That would be such a great viral video.
I'm just kidding. I don't.
I don't. I think it's a great idea.
But one of the interesting side aspects of Dr. Carell's appointment was some very sharply worded comments from the mayor of St. Petersburg, Rick Kreisman, who used the opportunity to say, I hope he is more of an honest broker than the current president, Judy Ginshaft. And clearly, Mayor Kreisman was expressing some disappointment about how the situation has been handled regarding the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. As you know, there are moves underway to bring all of USF satellite campuses under one umbrella and have them operate with less independency. Do you think it was right for Mayor Kreisman to kind of call out President Ginshaft as he did?
I mean, I think you could do whatever you want. You're Mayor Kreisman. I mean, I feel like, yeah, go for it, buddy. I mean, you do you. But I also don't think, and please correct me if I'm wrong, because I understand the consolidation process. I sit on the board of the USF Alumni Association, so I get a lot of emails about it. I read a lot about it, but I really don't think she owes him anything. I mean, they are a tenant on the city of St. Petersburg's land, I guess, but at the same time, she is the president of a university to which he is not, I guess. So I think
Well,
that,
what he said is that she hasn't been an honest broker.
Right,
That
but I'm
she's been
saying that-
misleading the city. And obviously the city's quite concerned with what's going to happen with USF St. Pete because it's been integral to helping develop the city and particularly develop the downtown district.
and I think that's a fair statement, but I also don't think from an organizational perspective that USF really has it together enough to be misleading. I don't think I don't think that they have their shit together. And I think that if they did and then they overtly misled him, that's one thing. But I think things are pretty kind of rocky over there and pretty confusing in terms of which direction they want to go. And that's okay because they're figuring things out. But while they're figuring things out, I don't know that they owe him like a ton of communication. I don't know. Chris, what do you think? You live there. Becca lives there.
I think that the mayor tweeted something that was even more interesting, and that was in response to a Orlando Sentinel editorial where Mayor Kreisman wrote, and this was on March 30th, UCF should in fact do better than USF when conducting its presidential search. They should also look at many of our nation's outstanding female and minority academic leaders. USF, FSU, and UF are led by white men over 60. We can do better.
I have a lot of feelings
Wow.
on that. I think that Hoop, you probably do too.
Mayor Kreisman's just dropping bombs everywhere.
Well-
Says the white guy who, if someone tried to take his power, he'd be like, let's rethink this a little bit. Are there really enough qualified minorities and women out there? Because I'm probably best qualified. Because you know that would happen.
Right, and I think that I'm from the school of thought that the best candidate, whether it's
Please
to
don't.
lead a university or to
Please
lead a local city council,
I think there are many
should
qualified
be
candidates.
the best person, not necessarily, a specific gender or
I think
race.
of the four that we had, I think this guy was the best one. Could the search committee have tried to get other people that were more diverse, maybe presidents of other universities, maybe to apply and be finalists? Maybe.
And USF just had a woman president, and I believe the president before Judy Ginshaft was also
Yeah, Betty was
female.
awesome. Yeah, but she was also not a career academic.
And this
So-
is one of those times where I'll actually take up for USF that they're one of the most notable people on campus has been an African American man for the last 5 years, and that was Willie Taggart and now Charlie Strong.
I was going to be like, who's that? But sure, okay.
And so, and you know, you look at UCF, and yeah, we went from one old white man president to another white male president, but our basketball coach is African American. We have a woman leading our women's basketball program. USF has a Hispanic leading their women's basketball program.
Yeah, I think in their
And so
administration.
you pick
they're
the
diverse.
best.
Yeah, but
I
I don't know if you can look at athletic programs as being the flag bearer for a university's diversity and inclusion.
No, but they're representative. That people see them and they know them. I think that's what he's saying.
Well,
Right.
yeah,
I mean,
but the reality
Yeah.
is the presidential search did not involve a lot of transparency. We've debated this before, but because it didn't involve a lot of transparency, we really don't know if they considered a diverse pool of applicants. I think that's the point Mayor Kreisman is making, is that we need more transparency so we can at least know they considered a diverse pool of
I'd like
applicants.
to go on a limb here and say that they considered a lot of diverse people, but they didn't want the job. Because I really think that USF is on a great trajectory. We've done a lot of great things, but honestly, the fact that there is not one prestigious research university president, not a chancellor, not a vice president, not a director of advancement, not one single CEO of a company, and not one single, kind of community activist, notable community activist or leader out there that made that Final Four. And honestly, I looked through the list of CVs that were posted publicly, and I didn't really see anybody that was awesome either. So I'm wondering who actually applied for the job.
Yeah, maybe they couldn't get some awesome people to apply.
Yeah.
That takes us back to the consolidation where they got tremendous pushback and they said, and here we go. I mean, like they were looking what they believed, and I don't know enough about it or the nuances, but what they believed was the best for the long-term growth and vision for next leveling USF. And they made a lot of people angry in the process. But you know what? If everybody likes you, then you're not doing anything right.
Agreed. And I agree with that. But at the same time, when you send out a letter, and I'm looking at you, Ralph Wilcox, when you send out a letter and you're like, oh, all of y'all who are hired under just being regular teachers now have to adhere to tenure standards of a research university. And if you haven't gotten tenure, we'll work with you so you can publish in these flagship journals. You're basically telling people to walk and find another job that have already committed, gone through the interview process, and committed as teachers to now be star researchers. Because that's what you're telling them. And that's bullshit. And you're telling that to such a small percentage of the population. If they call quit, it wouldn't even make a difference statistically. That's poor leadership, and it's wrong. And I think it was probably one of the worst things I've ever seen an administrator do. Hands down.
I think clearly
Drops mic.
Stephen Carell is going to have a lot to deal with beginning with this consolidation issue. And I think he's going to discover that while President Genshaft was popular in some circles, there's going to be some other folks kind of coming out who are really going to have some real qualms with how the University of South Florida is conducting business. For example, there are a lot of questions about the university's minority business spending. And the folks who are raising those questions are not going to let that go just because they have a new president.
Can you talk about that? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, there's an expectation that a public institution should have a certain percentage of its business spending with minority-owned businesses.
What do you mean business spending? Like
what they
do
spend on
contracts.
like
vendors
hiring
and
my dad's
stuff.
company because my dad was
what they spend on
Spanish to do the got it,
what
okay.
they spend on printing, what they spend on construction of new buildings on campus, what they have spent building the new College of Medicine in downtown Tampa. There's some real issues with how much of that work went to minority-owned contractors.
I would think a lot, but probably by what you're saying, probably not.
Well, from what I've been told, it's a very small percentage. like less than 1%.
That's really weird.
So, that's going to be another issue he's going to have to deal with. And I also think you mentioned athletics. There's going to be a lot of discussion about whether the university builds an on-campus stadium. And you know what's really interesting? Someone was bringing this to my attention just the other day. At one point, there was a provision that said USF could never field a football team. Supposedly, I need to do more research, of course, but supposedly the person who donated the land back in 1956 or whatever for the University of South Florida had a provision that they would never have a football team. They wanted a university that would be more focused on academics than athletics.
Hi, it's Colin here. So, legendarily, USF's first president, John Allen, was very opposed to intercollegiate athletics, did not want to start anything. And in fact, USF didn't start a varsity sports program until he left. As far as a clause about whoever donated the land, I believe it was city land when it was taken over. So that might be an old wives' tale, but definitely the first president of the university was very anti-athletics. Also, while I'm here, Chris, since I have your microphone, the process for hiring people in the state of Florida in the Sunshine. So USF absolutely broke state law on this search. I don't think that's even a question. Like, the chair of the search committee, Les Moonman, came out and said, we've had 30 some great candidates. And the Tampa Bay Times put in a public records request and goes, okay, can we get those 30 candidates? And they're like, here's 11 people who applied online. So, and that's literally what happened. And I get it, because people who would be wanting the job don't necessarily want to be put out there publicly that they might be interested. And that's part of the recruitment process. And that happens in any, private company. So what changes, Chris, can we make to the search process, the HR process in Florida, so that we can be competitive as a state for these positions, but still have them out in the sunshine? I put a little thing on Twitter that I think I tagged you about a way that we might be able to go forward with this. But what can be done legislatively so that, one, we can still have the best candidates apply, and two, also make sure that a search is publicly accountable in some fashion?
I think that searches for university presidents, and my good friend Ernest and his newspaper will disagree with me, but I think that in large part it should be private, especially the initial stages. I would be supportive. I would be supportive of maybe a final list of candidates, whether it's 4, 6, 8, however many get released. But I don't think that every candidate that applies for a university position in Florida should worry about their name being released, because you want to attract the best person that you can find, whether it's in the university setting or elsewhere. For instance, at USF, what if somebody like a Paul Tash applied, or a Jeff Vinnick applied, somebody like that's outside of the university field, but would do, a good job as university president. The president at FSU is not an academic, but from everything that I've heard, everything that I've seen, he has done a good job as their president, and he comes from the political field.
He's done a great job, and they're kicking USF's ass right now, and UCF's ass right now. So, yeah.
So, some of their athletic supporting alumni might disagree with that assessment.
I wasn't talking about athletics.
No, but
academics are really important to me.
Yeah, I know. But
I like to read.
Colin and I are worried more about athletics.
And I like to read. I'm so sorry about that. Sorry.
As we're sitting here watching the women's Elite Eight to see who's coming to Tampa for the women's Final Four, which we'll get to in a bit. But Chris, I think this thing, I agree with you, but I would like to see some sort of way where we can have a gauge of candidates and sort of like a snapshot of who they are, in terms of, also that snapshot includes the diversity profile, so that if they are a minority, woman, whatever it is, that we can sort of take that, but sort of keep them anonymous in some way if possible, so that we can get the benefits of that search and make sure it is publicly held, but without outing people necessarily, for one.
Agreed.
And for two, this can't just apply to university presidents, because let me tell you, I've seen this problem with like volleyball coaches. You know what I mean? Like where you have to be publicly accountable for multiple positions, especially in athletic departments. You guys don't have this problem because you are a DSO of the university, UCF athletics, by you guys, I mean. But a lot of other state positions. So the state needs to change the process so that Florida can compete for the best people. But the way the law is written right now, did USF follow it? No. Would they have had a good as pool as they got? And you can still question the quality of the pool they got, but would they have had as good a pool if they followed the process legally? Probably not.
I don't think they had a great pool to begin with. So what do I know? I mean, if you look at, I'm also a University of Iowa alumni, and I graduated with my PhD and my master's from Iowa. And when the current president came in, people were really upset. He wasn't an academic. I think he was like CEO of Kentucky Fried Chicken or Yum Brands or something like that. And people were really, really upset because he didn't really reflect what they thought were the academic values of a university. But he's kicked ass and taken names. He's done a great job, and he's really managed to get a lot of the faculty on board with his initiatives, and he's listened. I think being a critical listener is incredibly helpful. And when you meet with someone, you're like, hey, what can I do for you? What do you need? What are the problems that I can help you fix? And he's really taken that approach. I think if this guy takes that approach, then he will accomplish some of the same things, because he's been a great fundraiser, and he's been he's a real academic, which is good. But I don't know. I think I would have liked to have seen a candidate list with some more diversity in terms of expertise. And I would have liked to have seen some research university presidents and some CEOs.
Somebody locally who's done a great job as a president of an educational institution is St. Pete College's Dr. Tanja Williams.
She's awesome.
She's amazing. And
you just want to give a moment of silence for her or what?
No, I was just pointing out that she was amazing. I was
really
waiting
cool.
for one of y'all to chime in.
I was like, and we're going where?
I think she's done a great job. I think you also could look at the job that Ron Vaughn has done building up the University of Tampa. Yeah. So, Chris, real quick before we turn to the fun and frivolity of this podcast, what's happening in Tallahassee?
Where I believe the next couple of days will be the halfway point of session. This coming week, the House and the Senate will pass our respective budgets. And then following that, we'll be beginning the conferencing with the Senate and the House to reach a consensus on a budget. And I expect that will be done right before the end of session. There's a constitutional amendment in Florida that our budget has to sit for 72 hours before it's voted on. And also we have to have a balanced budget.
So wait a minute. You guys have to sit and wait to vote on a budget for 72 hours, but let's not slow anyone down on getting a gun. They can't wait 10 minutes for that. But let's take a pause for the cause on something you worked on and planned for 2 months, if not longer. Got it. Keep going. Just want to make sure I was understanding.
It takes longer than 10 minutes.
Chris, where do you stand? There is a bill that's proposed that would make it more difficult for voters to pass constitutional amendments. Where do you stand on that? They seem to be, first of all, the legislature doesn't seem to be following the will of the people on several amendments that have been passed, and now they want to make it more difficult. How do you feel?
I think there are way too many amendments to the Constitution. And as was seen last year, just about every single one of them passed, even though they were being bundled together, which I'm not a fan of bundling of the amendments like the CRC did this past year. But I think it's way too easy to amend the Constitution. That particular bill, since it has not come before me for a vote, I haven't read it, so I couldn't give you a definitive answer. But just based in theory, I think that there are way too many amendments, and it's too easy to put an amendment on the ballot, because once it's on the ballot, the majority of them pass.
But the reason people are putting amendments on the ballot is because the legislature hasn't been acting upon their wishes, the will of the people, as we always like to say. And it's already, I'm not sure I agree with you. It's already really difficult to get an amendment on the ballot. You have to gather 750,000 signatures. So a lot of people who are passionate about certain amendments that they would like to add to the Constitution hire companies to help collect those signatures. The current bill being proposed would make it illegal for anyone outside of the state of Florida to help gather
Which
those
means there'd be a
signatures.
lot of companies popping up in Florida specifically to do that, and they would probably even be connected to the outside companies from outside the state. I think one of the amendments that they're collecting petitions for is the $15 living wage amendment, if I'm not mistaken. And I personally think that'd be a horrible idea to have a $15 living wage. I don't know what you guys think about that.
Well, I think if the legislature believes that would be a horrible amendment, write a bill that addresses the concerns that those folks who are supporting that have in terms of wages being depressed. If you just ignore the populace, yes, they're going to rise up and try to change the law the only way they know how, which is through a constitutional amendment. Too often in Tallahassee, concerns are going unaddressed, and then the legislature feigns surprise when someone decides to bring about that change through a constitutional amendment. What other choice did they have? You weren't listening to them.
But I think a lot of times, Ernest, the amendments interpretation gets changed after it gets passed. For instance, a few years ago with Amendment 1, the education spending amendment, during that whole campaign, there were multiple items, whether it was land preservation, land buying, conservation, etc., that was mentioned. That amendment gets passed, and then it changes to, oh, well, that money should only be used to buy and preserve land. And the whole conservation aspect is ignored. With Amendment 4 this past year, with the voter restoration of voter rights, I would argue, and it's a hot topic in Tallahassee, that paying restitution is part of somebody's sentence. But now it's, oh, well, as soon as they get out of prison, they've paid their debt to society. They don't have to pay restitution. They don't have to pay court costs, etc. They should just automatically get their rights restored.
Do you believe at all that the Republican-controlled legislature is worried that the restoration of felons' rights will benefit Democrats, and that's why they're trying to alter the course of that amendment?
That has not been mentioned in conversation.
Really?
But I think that, for instance, I believe it was Nancy Pelosi.
I bet
recently,
if it was white collar criminals, they would be
Nancy
like, sure, let's get them in there.
Nancy Pelosi recently floated the idea of allowing 16-year-olds to be able to vote. That is a blatant attempt for Democrats to try to expand their party. Anytime that they talk about giving undocumented immigrants, whether it's driver's licenses or the ability to vote, that's a blatant attempt to try to
I haven't heard
their
anyone
party.
talk about giving undocumented immigrants the right to vote. I haven't heard any Democrat.
I think
maybe
in
I
some
missed
states-
it.
in
I
some
might have missed
states.
it. I haven't heard any Democrats say that. I've always heard Democrats say the right to vote should be limited to American citizens, but
And my son just wrote a paper about why younger people should be allowed to vote because young people feel so misrepresented.
But 16-year-olds, I mean,
Then don't let them drive a car. Then make 18 the threshold for everything. I mean, I think it takes less cognitive awareness to vote than it does to drive a vehicle.
No, I think it takes more. I actually think it's probably about the same. I think if you are going to raise the driving age and raise the voting age, I think both are comparable because I think one, you're operating a weapon essentially because you can really hurt yourself.
I hate to sound like a conservative, but can we see more young people vote before we decide to lower the voting age?
That is a very good point.
They are not voting. The 18-year-olds are registering, but they're not going to the polls and voting. College students are not voting. you want to lower that age. Can the people who are eligible to vote show up and vote and act like they care? I'm not compelled to lower the voting age until I see more people between the ages of 18 and 24 showing up and making a difference.
No, I
Ernest
think we
is
need to
sounding like a
ban.
Republican.
I think we need to ban people 25 to 59 from voting and let the seniors and the young people vote, because clearly we're not getting it right. So
Hey.
maybe we need to start with our fringe folks.
Well,
And I think it's
we've messed
sad
up a lot of
commentary.
things.
I think it's a real sad commentary that Chris thinks that young people who are bright, hopeful, and optimistic would always vote for Democrats. So is it what
The-
you're
the
saying
youngest-
is? So what you're saying is, until you kill their soul, they're going to vote for a Democrat.
The youngest members of the Florida legislature are Republicans.
Well,
That
then-
is a
then-
fact.
Well, then, so which is the fact, Christopher? Is it that letting young people vote is strictly to advance the Democratic Party, or is it letting young people get involved in the process spawns more
If
vivacious
16
young Republicans to take office early? Because you can't have it both ways.
If 16-year-olds were able to vote, they would. One of the Jonas Brothers or Miley Cyrus or whoever else would be like a front runner.
I don't think they like her anymore.
Well, see, I'm not 16, so I don't know who
do
they
you
like.
believe that there is such a tremendous growth and intellectual fortitude that happens between your 16th birthday and your 18th birthday?
Yes, I remember me.
Actually,
Oh,
that's
my
something I would
gosh.
agree with that. I
Yeah.
think that there's a tremendous amount of growth that happens between 15, 16,
Oh,
and
absolutely.
18, 19. I really do. But I think going back to should we raise everything else? I think if you're going to raise one, you have to raise the others. Because
Let's make them
feel
both
like-
17 and split the difference.
I feel like if you're giving them the opportunity to drive a car, then you should give them the opportunity to vote for whoever they feel should lead their
And-
city, their country, whatever. And if you're going
who's
to
going
raise
to set
one,
the
raise
price
the
of the
other.
tickets they're going to receive?
And I would like to go back and say and retract my statement about illegals trying to vote. That may not have been
Yeah,
accurate.
you're killing me, Smalls.
And instead of calling them illegals,
I said undocumented immigrants.
that is a more
a little
appropriate.
All right. The NCAA Women's Final Four will be in Tampa Bay this week. They are having a concert at Curtis Hickson Waterfront Park on Saturday. And for reasons that are completely unclear to me, they have signed up Gavin DeGraw to
I
be the
love
main
him.
entertainer.
He'll cry on your shoulder, or he'll be your crying shoulder. That was like one of his big songs.
You didn't get it right.
Back
Yeah.
when I was 16, that was a song.
Yeah, back when you were 16. There are all these popular women singers out today. Why could Dua Lipa, Rita Ora, Janelle Monáe, come on.
Okay, first of all, is Janelle Monáe's biggest stan on earth. Like, okay, I'd be with you for that. The problem is that the NCAA set the budget for this event. I am one of the social media, I think they're calling us point guards for the women's Final Four. This concert, so when the college football playoff was here, it was Usher and somebody else opened for Usher that was pretty good, as I recall. For the
You can't remember, so it's probably a woman.
No, I
yeah,
was-
exactly. So for the NHL
That doesn't
playoff,
count.
it was Fits in the Tantrums. Okay, Gavin DeGraw, Fits in the Tantrums, kind of level. I think that's about even in terms of like star power. Fair.
I really enjoy Gavin. I've seen him in
I love
concert
Fitz,
4
too.
times, and I've been in front row 1 time of those 4. I would like to go.
Am I wrong to suggest that a woman's musical
You
I
are
was
not.
thinking-
act should
when I
be
first-
at the
Not
NCAA
wrong. I
Women's
think that
Final
would be really
Four?
cool, but it's what they can afford.
I thought it was going to be the Indigo
You
Girls.
don't think
like
women
Florida
are paid less than
thing,
men?
you know
There's
what I
got
mean?
to be some
They're
artists.
already here in
You
Clearwater,
could
like
get
this
a more
weekend.
popular
Right.
artist
Yeah.
and pay them, 75 cents on the dollar of what you'd pay a man. I completely reject that argument. I
What
think it
you
was
can
lazy
afford?
and short-sighted.
I like him very much. I really enjoy my Pandora station, my Gavin DeGraw Pandora station. I think it's a great station.
Can we also talk about some of the great other events that will be here? For example, Capital One is presenting Capital One Tourneytown, again, April 5th through 7th, live at the Tampa Convention Center. There will also be the Bounce of the Bay, I think they're calling it. Anyway, you get your kid, they got a rubber basketball. They dribble it from, I think, like the Riverwalk down towards the arena. It's adorable. They did it last time when the Women's Final Four was here in 2015. I think they have space for like thousands of kids still available. So sign up at WFFTampaBay.com. Again, that's WFFTampaBay.com. But this is a huge event. And even if you are not somebody who's super into women's basketball or whatever, you will see this event touch all over this community for the next week. And as we tape this, UConn did advance. I know that seems like, if you don't follow women's basketball, that doesn't seem like a surprise, but this year they were kind of down and they were the 2 seed going in and they beat the 1 seed to get here. So it should be a lot of fun. It looks like Notre Dame's going to have a pretty good shot to be here. Baylor's going to have a pretty good shot to be here. And then whoever wins this Oregon State or this Oregon Mississippi State game will be here next week. So it's a terrific event, and I think there's only like a couple hundred tickets left. So if you want to go,
wonder why Tampa is so good at hosting major sporting events.
I'll tell you, it's Rob Higgins and Tampa Bay Sports Commission. Those guys do an unbelievably incredible job. Like, one of my really good friends is like the associate director or director of the Miami-Dade Sports Commission. They have like 2 or 3 people in staff, and they really struggle because the venues don't communicate with each other. Everything's in a silo. They don't really pull the city together. And Tampa, everyone gets on board for these things. So whether it's Women's Final Four, Frozen Four, next year in 2020, we'll have first and second round of the NCAAs, the Super Bowl, college football playoff, whatever it is. WrestleMania. The whole city gets on board.
I know Rob does a great job, but to me, there's something cultural about Tampa and Tampa Bay that we get excited about these events. I think you could have there's some other cities you could have these events in, and I'm not sure the people would really care. I'm not sure if you had the Women's Final Four in Chicago, people would be really excited. I'm not sure if you had it in New York, people would be excited. Here, there seems to be a mix of Southern hospitality, genuine interest in the event, and wanting to help the city shine. That's all great. I think part of it may be that there's a bit of still, even in 2019, a bit of an inferiority complex. We in Tampa Bay are still trying to prove to the rest of the world that we're America's next great city.
I want us to have, we probably don't have time to have the battle now, but I want us to go, which is the greater county, Pinellas or Hillsborough?
Oh, Pinellas, easily.
Well, of course, you and I know the truth,
far.
but I'm trying to help the others come along for the ride.
I'm going to go with, I don't think, I'm going to have an unpopular statement and say I think that's the wrong question to ask. Because I think that
boy.
That's what people say when they live in the inferior county.
Yeah.
That's, yeah.
We are Tampa Bay. We are one. There's no more Hillsborough versus Pinellas. It's time for us to let that go. You know, even though Hillsborough,
he's admitting defeat.
Even though Hillsborough is the site of the arena where the hockey team plays, the stadium where the football team plays, the major university that's consolidating the little university in St. Petersburg,
of the arena
and the international airport. But if you want to stay in Pinellas and fly out of St. Pete Clearwater, Allegiant,
absolutely. Allegiant's fine.
Yeah, you can have Allegiant.
When I take it, so that's good.
We're about to open a medical school. We have the beaches, which drive more people here than anything else. We have more arts and culture in our county than anywhere else, and we still have an old Florida feel. The experience of going to Dunedin or Safety Harbor is magical. St. Pete,
Clearwater,
yes, St. Pete is a treasure hunt, and Clearwater is the star of our biggest celebrity within the Bay Area, Winter the Dolphin. I mean,
say Scientology? Oh my God!
Scientology does
for
bring
years,
stars.
the Tampa Bay Lightning played in an arena named the Tampa Bay or St. Pete times 4.
But it was a shitty arena. Nobody liked it. Nobody went to see them.
Okay, that's true. So here's the thing: if you're going to take all the beautiful beaches and downtown St. Pete, which I think is wonderful and amazing, and if somebody was like moving from outer space to here, I would say that of all the places in the Bay to live right now, I would say downtown St. Pete is probably the youngest, most emerging, super hip. Downtown Tampa is getting there, but it's much more vertical. I think what they're doing in that side is wonderful, but you also have to eat Largo. Okay.
Oh,
I just went
we
there.
love
Largo, yeah,
You gotta
Largo's
eat
good
that.
people.
You got to eat that.
We're
you
Team
gotta
Largo
eat.
right here.
No,
You
no.
got
Like
to
the
eat
Democrat and the
Tarpon,
Republican
Newport,
highway.
Nowhere,
No,
all of it. You got to eat all of it.
They have
okay?
some of the best leadership
Yeah,
at the local
I
level.
love
in
Woody
Largo.
Brown.
Yeah, I mean,
Absolutely.
And they
I would
work
never go
together
to
as-
Largo.
They have
Let's just say
Democrats.
I'd never go to
bullcrap.
Largo.
Largo is where it's at.
Largo, we
Well,
are here for
okay,
you.
then take me to brunch at Largo. Take
Absolutely.
me,
We
take
will.
me someplace
We'll
fun.
We'll do
go
multiple
to downtown
Take,
Largo.
take
and
me
they have so
someplace
many
fun.
wonderful
And I'm
Hey,
driving. I'm
hey.
driving.
restaurants.
You're driving.
I'll go back to where I started. We are one. We are Tampa Bay.
At least we're not Port Richie.
Amen for that.
Actually,
Yeah, I've never
we
been there.
gotta include Pasco and Tampa Bay, and
Do we have to?
we do.
No, I'm seriously. Why would we? I'm curious.
because
Why?
it's
Chris, it's nice being
It's-
on the same side of.
it's part of
something with
the demographic market for Tampa Bay.
Yes, because
You know,
we
and
haven't
hey,
invested in the
and can I-
infrastructure for transportation.
That's very true.
So it's had to become part of it because
And we should film an episode in Pasco County.
That'd be really fun.
I'm not
I'll get my
allowed-
hair done in Pasco
Hey,
County.
we could
given out
go.
all
We
the-
could
they've
go to
given-
St. Leo. It is beautiful.
It is
there.
beautiful. San Antonio is gorgeous.
Yeah, I'd
That's
love.
like
I'd
2
love
hours
to do,
away from.
No, it's not.
I'd,
It's
love,
like an
I'd love to
hour.
do a podcast
They've been
episode
a
at
client
St.
of
Leo.
mine for many
There's
years.
that one bar that's really cute, that local bar that used to be owned by the Pearl in the Grove people, and it's like a stand-up market, and you walk outside, you can take your dogs, and you can sit and have brunch. It's very cute there. We should do it
And
there.
I've had a good
I'm
time.
really hurt the way they took down Largo. They clearly don't know.
Wait,
Yeah,
wait.
that-
No,
Yeah.
we. Hey. No,
Okay.
we. No. I
Okay.
On the record, Ernest Hooper had nothing bad
I
to
wonder
say
if people in Largo read the
about
newspaper.
Largo.
I know they've been wonderfully supportive of this podcast.
Well, can
Yeah.
can you take me there? I've never been to Largo.
Okay,
We will-
You've never been there, and you are.
Oh
like,
my gosh! A typical liberal.
I've driven
typical
through.
typical liberal
I've
gonna bash
driven
something
through
that
there.
you've never tried.
Well, I've driven through there. I have
By
not
the-
been
by
impressed.
the way-
but I don't. I've
You've never
been
tried
to
a charter
brunch
school,
there.
and you're sure willing to stroke a lot of checks to them.
By the way, if there are communities that need to be lifted up in Pinellas, it's not necessarily Largo, but we could talk about Lilburn and Kenneth City, which needs a lot of help.
Yeah.
Now, I
A lot
know
of great
that-
people live
which
there
is
too.
great because I know Hillsborough has no communities like that are challenging in neighborhoods.
No, certainly we do. And certainly
Yeah, I
we're
don't
making
go
an
there
effort to
anywhere.
lift them up.
No.
And
Not really.
I think you're going to see a lot of the growth that has come to Tampa Heights spread to Sulphur Springs. And I predict in
hope so.
10 years, Sulphur Springs is going to be a very different place than it is today. And hopefully we'll be able to bring about those changes without bringing in gentrification.
I mean, Sulphur Springs has statistics that are worse than some third world countries in terms of literacy, access to basic needs, food, water, clothing, shelter. It is heartbreaking, and I know that I'm in Junior League, and Junior League does a lot to work with that community. But it is a really, really tough road, and it's also really, really hard to do this kind of political, socioeconomic kind of change work with communities that you're really not a part of. I don't want to walk in as like the privileged white chick being like, hey, here's what you need. I think that's incredibly offensive, and it's not the way to secure change. You have to work with people and sustain
you make an excellent point.
change. And I feel like a lot of people aren't prepared for that. They don't have the budget for that. They don't know how to do it. And the execution is poor. So I think this is just a bigger problem than just being like, oh, let's clean up some neighborhoods. It doesn't work that way. And I would like to see Sulphur Springs change in a way that is best for the people that live there, not the best for the people who have brunch there. So
And I think that's valid. And if you need some advice on how to really revitalize the city, I think our friends at Largo, who are Democrats, Republicans, and Independents, would be happy to help you.
And Commissioner
right there.
Robinson loves our podcast.
take me
and
to
and the mayor loves our podcast.
dude,
and you're-
then they should take me to brunch, and I should take them to brunch.
I'll take you to brunch.
Let's go.
I got nothing against Largo. Have I said that? I want to make sure I'm under
I've
Ernest
only
Hooper.
driven
Are
through.
you,
Yeah, that
are
was-
you experiencing white guilt about
No,
Largo?
that was Colin. That was Colin driving the Largo criticism.
What is the
Look,
Colin
demographic
doesn't
of
even have
Largo?
a car. He can't find Largo.
I claim all of Tampa Bay. I tell people I'm from Tampa Bay, and there is something to love about every corner
And-
of Tampa Bay.
So
And out of all y'all who've been to a Gavin DeGraw concert,
Well,
out of all y'all,
I think I might have.
oh, I'll take that as a no.
No, I'm pretty sure that I've been to a Gavin DeGraw concert. I just can't remember
Who's
where.
been to a Gavin DeGraw concert sober?
why didn't they just get Sister Hazel if they wanted to?
I love Sister. What
Isn't
wrong with
Sister
these
Hazel
people?
from like Gainesville or
Yes.
Are you
somewhere?
trying to hurt my soul?
Okay.
I just thought they could have done
So-
something new.
What's wrong with him?
How about the him?
do One Tree-
Let's
One
get
Tree
something
Hill?
who uses. Let's get a person who uses female pronouns. Go, Christopher.
So this week's Florida man story from the date that we're doing the podcast, which is March 31st, is from the Brevard Times from the city of Orange City in Volusia County, and that is Florida high school student charged after biting off chicken's head.
Oh,
So that's part of our Florida
Wow.
heritage here.
that's horrible.
A 17-year-old student at University High School in Orange City, Florida, was charged today with felony animal cruelty and trespassing on school property after he was identified as the person who allegedly decapitated a live chicken Easter weekend. A Volusia County Sheriff's Office school resource deputy at the high school identified this gentleman as the student who was bragging about biting the head off of a chicken.
Oh my God, that's like a future serial killer in the making.
Did
right
Marilyn Manson or aren't there just some rock star who did
there. Yeah,
that?
Ozzy Osbourne used to have fake bats, and one time someone gave him a real bat, and he almost threw up because he actually bit into a real bat. It was. A
Have you ever been to an Ozzy Osbourne
Yes.
concert?
Man, she does not discriminate. She'll go to any male performer out there. I'm just kidding. But she clearly goes to more concerts than we do. I'm just trying to get to the Indigo Girls concert. Now, if
I
that's
would
not a
love to go to the
democratic stereotype.
Indigo Girls concert. I would love to. I've never
Yeah.
seen them live. I would love to.
Oh, I have. They're fantastic.
Yeah, I was gonna go in 2011, but I got really, really sick, and I couldn't go that night. They're performing at Ebor, and I really wanted to
Becca
go.
ready to bring back Lilith Fair.
Hell yeah!
Oh, well, until it turned out that, their founder, wasn't there some racist undertone? She was trying to
Ani
host events.
DeFranco.
Just like
Ani
the-
DeFranco.
on
I love Ani
Plantation.
DeFranco.
Just like the
She's got
Women's
some-
March people.
She's got some.
Yeah,
she's got some issues.
there are some challenges there.
But I still love Ani DeFranco.
But
She has
again, I
issues.
do think, and this will take us as we round the bend in this episode, is we have to decide, and we've talked about this, is, we talked about things from 30 years ago. If we talk about things from our time, I mean, how many times have we all said, thank goodness there wasn't social media the way there is now when we were in college? I'm not excusing bad behavior, and I'm not excusing patterns of behavior, but does this, and we don't have to decide this today, but should a singular incident not substantiated by anything else historically or by other people, should that really be a disqualifier and a career killer? I don't know. I just,
no.
I'm gonna go with no too, but I think it also depends on context.
I
and how
mean,
you
murder
handle it.
maybe. Like if they murdered somebody, you can't
Well,
really
it depends
like,
on
roll
how
away
you
from
murder
that.
someone. Like, why? Are they trying to kill you? Or they, the context
like
matters.
self-defense. I guess that's true.
Context matters. Or you try to save someone else and you murder. That's what I mean. Context matters, and how you handle it after matters. And as the crisis comm person of all of us, I focus on that, and I tend to focus on communication after the fact and context, because that's kind of what I do. But I totally get other people that say, yes, one moment should disqualify you.
I
get
agree.
it.
And if Deneen has a criminal record, I think that sometimes you have to
She
look
probably
at
does, man.
where do you, like what was the
Context.
impetus in her life that led her there? Ernest, I think you wanted to say something about this.
Could it have been heartbreak that led her to
Well,
commit some crimes?
first of all, we know that she rebounded nicely and started going out with Tony Scott. So
Let's pour
no,
a little
I
something
don't,
out for Tony
I don't,
Scott.
I don't think there was any heartache there, and I'm sure whoever this person is that you guys always reference on this podcast,
No clue.
she's doing just fine wherever she is, and let's hope that
Where's
you
the
know,
women's prison at?
we
I'm not sure. I love how you ask me. My dad only sent my male partners to prison. Not there was no. I've had no female partners that he has sentenced, or in life. I'm not that.
It's actually the Lowell Correctional Institute, which is in North Marion County. Don't ask me how I know that, but I do.
And that is on the way to Tallahassee. So when driving through Marion County, maybe I can stop in and look at the roster.
Do a check. Should we let everyone know that we're all coming to Tallahassee?
We're coming to your city.
Can we
Coming to the
stop
swamp.
by that?
Getting ready?
Okay.
Maybe we'll even make laptop stickers for everybody that say "so dishonorable."
Oh, I would love that.
I think we're doing something special. All right.
All right, let's wrap it up with some final thoughts. Carla, what's your final thought?
I think Gavin DeGraw is pretty awesome, and I'm really annoyed that none of y'all have been to a Gavin DeGraw concert.
I
except for
have been. I
maybe
just can't
you.
remember where.
I feel like that's the story of your life, but sure. None of
Maybe
y'all
it
have
was.
been.
I think maybe at like Universal Studios he went for something, and I was there.
Maybe it was your teen night when you were in high school.
He's too old for that.
My final thought is UCF should have beat Duke, and I'm very
I was
disappointed
heartbroken
that
with that.
they did not.
That's so sad. Yeah.
And one day USF will have some storied athletic achievement. Just hasn't happened yet.
My final thought is a sports one. My son hit a triple yesterday in a game. He was on the leaderboard for all the little stats things that you look at that I don't understand, but I know are good. And it was a killer day in the Teeter household. And I said, babe, what was, I mean, because he's usually good, but like he was killing it yesterday. I said, babe, what was the difference? And he's like, I just went out there and I was really confident.
How many yards did he have to gain to get a triple?
I have to. Oh, stop trying to
I don't understand
confuse
the
her.
question. He made it to third base. What is that?
No, I'll follow up on that by telling you there's no more deeper emotion than watching one of your children participate
Story.
in athletics. And I remember when my son, who rarely played at Armwood High, got a chance to come into the game when the score was 52-0, and they got the ball down to the 1 yard line, and then they let them go in the game and go in and score the touchdown. And
Your son's Rudy.
you know what meant the most to me though?
He gave you the game ball?
His teammates were so excited to see him score that touchdown.
Oh, that's so great.
And you would have thought it was the game-winning score in the final seconds of the game. They were literally
That's
jumping
awesome.
up and down and cheering for him.
Oh, I have all the feelings.
So,
Thank you for that.
and I'll leave you with this. I recently went to a Tampa Bay Rowdies soccer game. I think we need to go out there and do a podcast from one of those games one night. They are an absolute blast. You've never been to a sporting event.
They're really fun.
Hey, what county is
like
that
a
in?
rowdy soccer game? No. I embrace Tampa Bay. I embrace Tampa Bay. You can't get me on this Hillsborough Pinellas divide. There's greatness throughout Tampa Bay.
Same.
You can't.
Just maybe a little more
can't
of
say-
that greatness resides in
I'm
Pinellas.
sorry. I was the first person that said we were asking the wrong question.
Yes.
I'm offended by that question.
I was offended too.
Thanks.
All right. That'll wrap it up. Join us next time
Peace
for
out.
another episode of Dishonorable Mention.
You know, if Gavin DeGraw came on the show, I think y'all would sing a different tune.